Hello and welcome to Fanatic. This is our look back on the Black Library Weekender 2019. We recorded this about a week before its release and just under a month after the event itself, so a little bit late in releasing it. I do apologise for that. But Michael and I basically, we go through and talk about the event as usual and the bits and pieces that came out of it. It's maybe a little bit different to how we've done it before, although probably a lot of the similar things as well, but I'm sure you understand why on that one. Michael's also done stuff on Track of Words about it as well, and we've got the advent calendars going on at the moment, which Michael's keeping up to date with, so you can go and check that out at the Track of Words as well. But I'm going to leave this short and sweet, only to say that if you do want to support any of the shows we do, if you're on this side of the pond buying your books or your toys or your paints, your airbrushes, anything through Element Games using the link in the show notes or the advert that is on the website, then that gives us a small kickback and helps pay for hosting, etc., etc. So thank you for anyone who does do that. But as I say, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. We're going to jump straight in to the interview with Michael. And joining me once again is Mr. Michael. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm grand, thank you. And we're going to talk about the Weekender, which happened a few weeks ago from recording. But we get there eventually. Busy.
Yeah, so, busy lives. It's hard
Indeed.
to organise these things.
It is.
Yeah, 9th and 10th of November. So,
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
No, absolutely. And once again, we went back to the Belfry.
Yeah.
A lovely hotel just outside Nottingham. And a couple of changes to the layout of the venue, which was quite interesting walking in. Where the old sales stand has now become a seating area.
Yeah, I guess they've just had a bit of a rejuvenation of the front of house bit of the hotel, haven't they? The rooms, the meeting rooms, the seminar rooms were very similar, but the bar was a bit different. And where the sales table used to be, which is basically slap bang in the middle of the foyer, I don't know, they sort of built something there, so the sales stand was then off at the back a little bit smaller. But I think overall it worked. Change is as good as a rest.
Yeah, and the I think it possibly helped a little bit in the evening. Actually, people seemed to be a bit more spread out on the Saturday night. And then the other thing that having less space did was it kind of forced their hand to have less stock there, which is quite good for them, to be honest, because previous weekenders, they bring huge quantities of books, and apart from the new stuff, they don't sell a huge amount of them.
Yeah, I always wonder about that. I think the sales went very well from what I heard this year.
Yeah.
But there was definitely, I heard people during and after talking about how they'd expected to be more of the back catalogue, maybe some of the old heresy books in hardback, those sort of things. In the past, there's been huge swathes of the sales stand dedicated to merch or art prints or the latest print-on-demand stuff, and not a lot of that. But it's fine, isn't it? As I say, it's focused on the cool stuff that's in people's minds.
Yeah.
That's most of it was either brand new, only been out very recently, or in advance, which we all like the chance to pick up the early stuff. And they had a couple of nice sort of display stands, which I thought was kind of cool. So you could see some of it, not quite in the person, but a little bit displayed rather than in its boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think there's a case of if it's just normal releases that you can pick up online, then you're talking about people who've paid, if they're staying at the hotel, 150 quid plus to come. The chances are the hardcore fans have already got those copies. So I think that worked out well enough. And as you say, putting the stuff on display was really a nice touch. So you could see exactly what was in the boxes. One of the things was the map for the Sabbat Crusades was on display, and I think a number of people were interested and then saw it and were like, no, I'm getting that. And
Yeah.
and hearing the price as well helped, because it was a reasonable price for what could easily have been much more expensive.
I agree. I wouldn't quite say stunned, but I was surprised that. So it's £30. It's going to be £30 when it goes on general sale. For something like that, when you consider things like the posh limited edition books, the big box sets that go for huge amounts of money, £30 for something which does look really rather nice.
Yeah.
Although what are you going to do with it? But it does look lovely.
Again, when the hardcore fans are like, oh, £30, like these are the people who have expectations on prices.
Yeah.
It's still not cheap, but then that's fine. It's a decent quality product, and they're not going to sell hundreds of millions of them.
No.
So whatever. If you don't like the price, you don't buy it at the end of the day. But I think 30 was a reasonable price on that.
Yeah, I agree. But really, other than that, there wasn't too much different in terms of the sort of physical aspects of it. What is different, not so much from last year, but from previous year. You and I have been to the Belfry many a time now. I think I've been there 10 times for weekenders now, something like that.
So
anyway,
was this this was the sixth Heresy
Sixth.
Black Library weekender? So I've done 5 of those, and all bar one Heresy weekender. So it's got to be at least 10.
Yeah, something like that. So I think there's maybe one fewer Heresy.
Yeah, maybe.
I forget. But so we've both been there plenty. What I really like is that Nottingham has developed that area a little bit more.
Yes.
So there was nothing there. But now there's a supermarket, there's a pub. Okay, if you're there with a car, there's always pubs relatively near, but it's so easy. It's 2 minutes walk now. And it changes the dynamic a little bit, where you're not having to fork out over the odds for not very good food in the hotel.
And waiting for an age.
And waiting for an age is really, historically not that great service, because the bar staff tended to be in the past not that great at the Belfry.
And overwhelmed.
Or on their first day and those sort of things. So, which is fine. But it's nice to have that flexibility to go elsewhere. And I think it for me, it makes it a little bit more of a relaxing weekend, because I'm not worrying as much about, I've got to make sure I'm in the queue or you're in the right place. There's more options.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Just the addition of that, let's say, that pub and the supermarket make a big difference. It means you don't have to stock up. Like things like when you're stuck in a hotel or stuck in one area like that, the ability to go and buy some fruit and have some, it's such a small thing which really does help the weekend. And cheap drinks as well. So you don't keep getting stuck at the bar paying huge prices. On top of that, what helped, going back to the sales thing, just to jump on that because it's relevant in there. You talked about not having to rush around. For the first time, Black Library have actually put a raffle ticket, and it was just a normal raffle ticket. Well, they gave one out to everyone. It wasn't in their bags. But as they queued up, you got a raffle ticket for the raffle in the evening, but you also got one which you had to hand in to obtain your copy of Siege of Terror Book 3. So that mad rush for that one book was reduced. So I didn't go and get it till halfway through the Saturday.
Yeah.
Now, if you wanted other limited edition stuff, then people still queued. But it took a little bit of the pressure off.
I agree. I mean, we should talk about the first thing on the Saturday anyway. There's the Weekender is a, for me and for you and I, it's sort of a 3-day event really, because we tend to go up on the Friday, have a bit of time at Warhammer World and that sort of thing, see how the guys are setting up the sales stand Friday night, so on and so forth. But it kicks off officially Saturday morning, and I popped down a bit before 9 o'clock. So I think they'd said that the sales stand, registration and sales would start at 9. And I think it did, but I came down from the room and was quite surprised at the size of the queue.
Yes.
It was a considerably larger queue at that time than it had been last year, but well organised, fine. And then it started moving at about 9 o'clock, but quickly ground to a halt. And so the issue was problems with the tills. And as I understand it, the scanners weren't working, so the poor hard done by sales staff were having to manually type in the barcode number, I guess, for everything. And if someone was buying more than one, then you couldn't just do times two. You had to do it twice. So everything did slow down. Now, in previous years, as you say, they've never done anything about guaranteeing access. So there's always been a little bit of tension of, what's going to be special edition? What's going to run out? Make sure you get your own thing, you get what you want. And at the Heresy Weekenders, they tend to open the sales stand on the Friday, right?
They've done it a couple of times, yeah.
But I don't think they've ever done that at the BL one. They certainly didn't do this year. But so I think if they hadn't been handing out those raffle tickets, more people would have been concerned. But I was the same as you. I was stood in the queue. I'd handed my ticket over and got my lanyard and goodie bag and stuff by that point. And I was just chatting away to friends, and it was getting closer and closer to 10 o'clock and the opening address. And I was thinking, I'm no way near the front of this queue. I'm absolutely not going to get to it. So just gave up. I wasn't going to buy too much. I knew I would be able to get my copy of the first wall. So great, what's the stress? And I think in hindsight, I spoke to a fair few people and have heard from people since who said, yeah, I probably should have done the same. I think people would, I don't know, whether they were still feeling concerned, maybe they wanted to buy some of the other limited edition stuff, or just a bit sort of stubborn about it. I don't know. But a lot of people stayed in that queue. We didn't, but a lot did. So in the opening address with poor Neil, the boss of Black Library, there's about 15 of us in the big room. So it slightly changed the tone of the start of the day.
Yeah.
But I certainly a couple of my friends were getting a little bit wound up by it because they stayed in the queue for a bit. But everyone relaxed afterwards. I think I didn't really sense any tension for the rest of the day, and so the sales stand, the tills hadn't broken. We'd have got through that much quicker. The big issue obviously was everyone wanted the first wall, and limiting it to one per person and enforcing that through a really simple manual system of just have a raffle ticket, I think was very smart. It would have been nice if they'd done that for all of the limited number things.
Yeah, so
can't complain too much.
No, so there's a few things. I don't think they bought a spare till with them, which is like the normal thing to do either. I was talking to someone and made a mistake which wouldn't normally be a problem, but because they then had a problem, it's you never forget the stuff when you don't need it, do you? So, one of those things which it happens. I say. It did put a little bit of a dampener on a few people's. Howard, our friend, he was right at the front just when they ran out of Sabbat Crusade maps. The good thing that Black Library did was anyone who was at the event who wanted to order a Sabbat Crusade map could. So later in the weekend, just go back, pay for it, order it. So again, you've had an issue, but you've resolved it the right way, and that's all you can do once you've had the issue. So that's
absolutely
fair play.
In hindsight, limiting that, which is a limited edition product, limiting to that to one per person would have been a sensible thing to do. They didn't. That's fine. And I think you're right. Reacting to something which they hadn't anticipated for whatever reason, reacting to it well in a way which sort of took ownership and gave a positive impression was really sensible. Because as soon as that word got round about that, great, not a problem. And loads of people put an order in.
Yeah, I listened to the Remembrance's Retreat is a 30k podcast. One of their gentlemen came over, Dave, an American chap, and he actually said that he was waiting in the queue and was like, I want to go and listen to these seminars. And someone actually spoke to him and he said, put your stuff back here and come back and get it. Which brings me to the other thing. Can they do that for everyone? Maybe not. Maybe they don't want to advertise that. But the number of people who didn't know we were going to get a ticket for the last wall, they put it on Warhammer Community. Now it's an interesting thing. I actually put a post up on the Black Library unofficial group on Facebook. The amount of people who are really into whether it's books or gaming or modelling or painting or what have you, who are really into Games Workshop, who don't keep an eye on Warhammer Community, astounds me. Because Warhammer Community is Games Workshop's official communication channel with us. Some stuff like at a Weekender, at a Warhammer Fest, at an open day, information does come out not via that source, but it's relatively little. Almost all the information they put out comes from Warhammer Community, and you don't have to be on it all the time. You can be set up for email alerts, or you can just pop onto there and look. If you're only interested in books, you look under the Black Library section, and it will give you all the posts about books in reverse chronological order. So it's actually quite easy to keep up with what Games Workshop have told us. So
I absolutely agree. These days it's not rocket science, and I think there have been some ups and downs with how GW have done this, or specifically BL, which they've largely resolved. I think in this instance, it is slightly symptomatic of a little bit of a lack of communication around the Weekender in general.
Yep.
So, in my opinion, they could have been clearer with the raffle ticket. The tickets were sold via Eventbrite, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is a cloud-based ticketing solution which allows event organisers to set things up themselves. So, like in the old days of ticketing, you had to ticket through an agent who did it for you. Eventbrite is one of a number of solutions, which means you don't have to do that. It's democratized. One of the great things Eventbrite allows you to do is send event updates to everyone who's attending. So I booked a ticket for a science fiction book event at a Waterstones recently, bookshop in London. And the day before, the event organizer, whoever it was, pushed a message through Eventbrite to everyone who'd bought a ticket to say, one of these authors is no longer able to attend. Sorry. Fine.
Yeah.
So it's free, doesn't cost you anything to do that, and it's the most efficient way of pushing information to everyone who's going, because everyone had to buy a ticket through Eventbrite. So I think that would have been a really nice thing to do to a couple of days beforehand, even the Friday night, just send something out that says, folks, we've already told you that it's going to be limited to one per person. The way we're going to manage that is through this. So make sure you keep an eye out for your raffle tickets in the morning, and that will be your solution. I think that would have just resolved it fine.
Yeah.
People definitely didn't know. In the raffle on Saturday evening, I heard a couple of people saying, well, what's this other ticket for? Well, friend, that was to get your copy of the book. So either they hadn't realised or they didn't want the book, I don't know. But some people, I hope not many, didn't realise that. Yeah. But that's fine. The solution at least is great. The communication before the Weekender did feel to me like a backward step from last year. So in 2018's Weekender, I was really impressed. That we've talked before about when tickets go on sale, but if you strip that out of the equation, the communication from the point at which tickets went on sale was great, because they put a page up on the BL website back when they were still doing everything that way, which listed all, if not all, then the majority of the new books that you're going to be able to buy, all of the guests who had been announced at that point, the schedule, loads of information about how to get there, where you could stay, where you can eat nearby, just the sort of basic, really useful information for someone who hasn't been before. You and I don't need it. We know all that stuff. But someone who's going to the Weekender for the first time, it's really valuable. So I was really impressed by that. And then, it was updated as more information became available. This year, it was nearly 2 months, I think, between me buying a ticket when it first went on sale and finding out the first bit of information, which was the schedule and the list of authors, and then another couple of weeks before we found out what books were going to be available and that sort of thing. Now, I get it. Scheduling these things is really tricky. But I don't think that was very good. And I think, again, for people who haven't been before, it's really important to get this sort of information out as soon as possible. Don't do it piecemeal if you don't have to. Give people as much information as possible. Now, if you're keeping tickets on sale for 2 months with no information about which authors are going to be there, what the seminars are going to be, what people are going to be able to buy, what the times the event starts and finishes, anything like that, how does that encourage people to buy tickets?
Yeah.
And we know, we've been loads and we see regulars, but I also spoke to a load of people who went for their first Weekender. And if it had been me, there's a fair chance I would have gone, well, this sounds cool, like a weekend of Warhammer and Black Library, but what is it? I'm paying a lot of money for it.
Yeah,
I want to know what I'm going to get.
absolutely.
And I think that was just a bit disappointing. However, once everyone got there, once people found out about the raffle tickets, I think that all of that falls by the wayside because we all just enjoy it.
Yeah, and there are, yes, and fingers crossed that was just kind of a slip. And last year will be the goal that they set themselves for future years. And we both spoke to someone actually who's going to be part of sorting out events, and they've got some big plans. I'm not going to go into those big plans because they might not happen.
Yeah.
But there is a definite an approach from at least a part of that organisation to make everything run really smooth next year. And I'm sure some things will go wrong, but that's fine. But if half of what he talked about happens, I think it would be really good. A real effort to make it an easy experience, which is customer focused and takes the stress out of those little stressful bits and all that as well. So and I won't speak about what they were exactly, but our little group was filled with a little bit of hope and confidence, I think.
I agree, and I think. It seems to me, and I don't know the details, that up until last year, the Black Library weekenders were always organised by people who work for Black Library. I don't know what they do nor did outside of the weekend. I'm sure they had lots of other things they would do in their day-to-day. This year, I think, has been organised by the events team, who are obviously getting slicker as they run more and they run loads of events. But it did feel a little bit like the things which pestered me in advance were the things that I think the BL folks have done in the past, and felt a little bit like there's that distance between it.
Sure.
But the sort of terminology, making sure it's customer focused, and those sort of things that you heard people talking about are positive. And all it needs is one person to sort of step up and say, look, this is what we're going to be really focusing on. These are our goals. And I think they can have a big impact in something like this. So fingers crossed that all develops positively. But the event itself, I actually think it's the organisation around the event where there's still a little bit of work to be done. The core of the event, which is getting authors and fans in the same rooms with interesting things to talk about, Black Library folks did that really well, as usual. Great comparing, well thought out, well organised, huge variety of things to do. So I don't think they have that much to do to get it to really nail it.
And I will say, so apart from the weekender, Heresy and the Black Library weekenders, they don't really run any events like that either. So they very much are the outliers. So they have to be treated differently.
Agreed.
Warhammer Fest and even their appearances at Adepticon and all that, it's fairly formulaic for all that they do. So they've got a setup and it works. And for an open day, you don't have to feed that information in. It's like turn up and talk to people, basically. You'll give them that a little bit on that one. But let's talk about the event. First off, we should say there were quite a few people in attendance. Yeah,
I think more people than last year.
Definitely.
I don't know the numbers, but a good couple of hundred or more.
Oh no, I just meant authors.
Oh, I see.
But
you're right.
It was well attended as well.
It was well attended, but in terms of guests, a lot of authors, one artist, and a few of the Black Library staff who are involved in the art side of things, and 3 actors, I think.
Yeah.
From the audio drama side, but so there was I guess they needed it because the schedule was heavy. There was a signing session happening anytime, like every point during the event, apart from sort of lunchtime and then when it finished of an evening. So there's always signings going on. There were 3 main rooms plus a sort of quiet room plus an art studio. So you need a lot of guests to fill those. And a lot of these seminars, some of them were just one person, Gav talking about his new Heresy book, for example, but a lot of them were 3, 4 or more guests on multiple sofas. So loads of authors.
Yeah, and we know that they like to bring over authors that have got books out.
That's sensible.
Yeah, it is sensible. So, there's no ADB here. He's got nothing coming out.
No.
But there is also an element of they wanted a lot of authors here. It appears they wanted to promote a lot of their newer authors as well, and it costs money to have authors at these things. So putting them for 2 days means you've got to pay more money because of staying over, etc., etc., etc. So there is definitely kind of, as there should be from them, a monetary approach to this as well.
Yeah, that's right. So there was a huge number of authors, and a lot of them were only there, as you say, for 1 day. So I guess there was a core. You sort of people like Guy, who is a total pro and always sticks around for these things. A couple of the folks who got brought over from the States, so Clint Werner and David Annandale were there the whole time.
I should say that David Annandale comes from Canada.
That's right. He comes from North America.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It makes sense if they're coming over. They probably went and had meetings as well at Warhammer World around the same time because you maximise that cost. Dan staying for both days this year.
Again, total pro.
Yep, absolutely. But I mean, he's been busy before he can be busy. So, having him around, making the most of that was really good. And then, a large list of names of authors of pretty much anyone you wanted to be there.
I think it's always a shame with these things because as fans, we're greedy and we want to see everybody. So I'm sure there were people there who were sad that Aaron, ADB wasn't there. There are some of the, as you mentioned, there were quite a lot of the newer authors, folks who have written novellas recently and that sort of thing. Loads of them were there, but there were still a fair few who weren't. But there tend to be the folks who are in North America or just not in the UK.
Yeah.
And it, while it's sad, it is, as you say, a sort of economic question of if you're going to pay for people to come over from States or Canada or elsewhere, you looking at it monetarily, you want to make sure it's your Clint Werners, your David Annandales, who have got brand new books out, sort of quite high profile books, and are really well known. So some of the newer authors who live in North America, hopefully in future years, when they've had a few books under their belt, they're sold really well, and fans have recognised them a little bit more, then they'll be brought over as well. But as you say, the folks like Eduardo Albert or Denny Flowers, who a lot of people might still not have read anything by because they've had a couple of short stories and a novella each. It was great to see them in.
Yeah, and hopefully some of those North American-based authors get to go to Adepticon or Nova or what have you. Fingers crossed that GW do a little bit more of that again, and not just with the big guys like Graham and whoever who are over there, but reaching out for some of the others who live closer to those events.
Yeah, I was having a Twitter chat recently with a few of them, some who've all sort of either come through the submissions window or have just had a relatively small number of releases. And I was saying maybe a publishing event or a gaming event is an established one is the way to do it for those, because the cost is less. Cost for them is less. Cost for GW or Black Library is less. But there's quite a number. Look back just a few years, and really you had Clint, you had David, before Graham moved over to the States, before Laurie went over there. There weren't that many who didn't live in the UK.
Yeah.
But now there seems to be a real upsurge, I guess because opening things up through the submissions windows and BL being a bit more proactive with finding existing authors, you've got a bit more sort of disparity of where people are living. And so I'm getting a real sense, I like supporting newer authors, and I've seen this real sense of a group of them, the sort of upsurge from outside of the UK. And it's nice because you want different voices. I think we want different voices. We don't want people who are always influenced by the same things. And so, if there's a good few of them who are in the States or Canada, then hopefully, as you say, Adepticon, or I don't know if there's a World Con or something like that, a publishing event.
I'm sure there is.
Like Library might. Well, there is a World Con, but I don't know where it's going to be next year.
Yeah, I'm sure there's other big events that happen over there, publishing and everything else as well. But yeah, absolutely. Should we jump into? We won't go through every seminar. No. Maybe we pick out a few. I don't know. Maybe that's the best way of doing it.
I think one thing there was a clear theme going through this year that it's been gradually building over previous Black Library events of sort of behind the scenes seminars.
Yes.
So for people who want to write for Black Library, or who are just a bit like me, really interested in what goes on, what it is like being an editor, what it's like being in a recording studio for an audio drama. So the smallest of the rooms, really, the Strategium. I think there was one event which was about new books, one seminar, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 others, which were all behind the scenes. And that was great. So there was a real consistent theme ranging from script writing to pitching to building narratives. And I think they were pretty popular because there's a lot of people who are interested in this. And there's a lot of people who want to write for Games Workshop, for Black Library. And I was sat in a couple of them, and the number of people with notebooks out, like literal pen and paper notebooks, scribbling notes down, asking questions about what books should I be reading about writing, what are the things to be thinking about. It was really interesting, I thought, and I liked that enthusiasm and that sense of energy from people who are frantically trying to get everything they possibly can out of the heads of these incredibly talented people.
Yeah, definitely. So the second seminar we were both in behind the curtain, and so this was 3 editors. So Richard Garton, Kate Hamer, and Hannah Hughes. And so just 3 editors talking about their processes and what they look for and how they work with authors. When you think about it from a general gamer's point of view, it's not an attraction. But as you say, there was a few of us in there. There were still lots of people queuing at this time, I should say.
Yes.
But it seemed like a third of the hall at one point were making notes.
Yeah.
Which talk about adding value to a ticket.
Totally.
Right, if you're vaguely writery, then there's a huge amount of value from this. And I think, because I talked to you don't really know the group much, but there was a group who came along called 50 Shades of Geek right at the start of this. It was a big group. They always used to sit in the same spot. Aaron's wife is friends with a lot of them, and at least I think 2, maybe 4, up to 4 of them have got stories published. At least 4, and others have got published elsewhere. So, and right at the start of this, they didn't. So there's, obviously these guys chat and whatever, but they're getting that kind of value out of this process.
Yeah.
And from other places as well, I'm sure, but there's a definite advantage in that.
I think so. And loads of those really interesting seminars running throughout the whole weekend. I'm sure we are not the only people who've come out of those thinking that was just really interesting. Yeah. And the behind the curtain one especially, how often do you get to hear the editor side of things? The editors are, a lot of them are on social media, but they are more guarded than maybe some of the authors are when it comes to offering advice and that sort of thing, understandably.
Yeah, they have to be. They actually they represent the company.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas
they're not freelancers.
No, exactly, and the authors are freelancers, and that's a major difference.
Yeah, definitely. So I was just fascinated in understanding what is the difference between a commissioning editor and a submissions editor, or just what are they looking for and what's the process? What is it like in their day to day? So that was really great. I also really enjoyed there was one called "No One Will Hear You Scream," which was about audio dramas. There were samples from 2 recent or not yet released, or just about released, horror audios. Both of the authors in there. And 3 of the actors, who are always good value. And that was just great fun. And I'd love to be a fly on the wall in one of those recording sessions to just see what goes on, especially when you hear them talking about, I forget what the word is. There's, at the end of every session, they have sort of an hour or something like that, where they just make weird noises and they shout and scream and all the stuff that you hear, the grunts of effort and the climbing up ladders and hitting people with battle axes. That's done elsewhere, and they just pick and choose the right sounds to drop in to make the right effect. And how much fun must that be, just seeing a bunch of actors just screaming and jumping up and down and having fun and wrecking their vocal cords?
I think more fun than doing it after the first period. I'm a watcher of Critical Role, and all the guys there are voice actors, and every now and then they start making in-jokes like, can you scream with a bit more pain? Can you scream with a little bit more frustration? Can you scream? And it's the same, same again, but higher, same again, but pitch it higher, and all that. I'm sure it gets a bit dull after a while for them, but certainly to look in on it would be, especially with people like Steve Conlin. Those three, Steve, Colleen and Matthew, seem to get on very well.
Oh, absolutely. There's a real rapport between them. And Steve, I met Steve at last year's, and he's a delight. He's so much fun. And he was talking about his first BL audio, which I think was an Andy Smiley one, because he was a world eater. And I'm pretty sure he's the world eater who was trapped under something and was really angry, surprisingly. And he talks about how he'd sort of done a take, much as you say, and Matt, the producer, said, "That's great, but can you do it again just wetter?" And I mean, it's just, he tells it so well. They sound great fun, and I'd love to get involved in something like that. But that's what you get. And how often, what are the circumstances, other than something like a weekend or an open day, you're going to get the opportunity to do those sort of things? 2 years ago, I think, you and I, poor Kenny Lull from Combat Phase, hadn't been able to make it. And so you and I were sat in the front row with Matt Renshaw and Toby Longworth, and you got Toby to record a direct message on video to Kenny. It's just, it gives you access. And I think that sounds kind of cynical, but it is what it is. It gives you the opportunity to get to spend time with people and ask questions and hear them talk that you wouldn't normally. And I think if anyone really wants to know what you get the most out of at a weekender, yes, you get the chance to buy cool new stuff. Yes, you get to hear people giving insights, and occasionally you get little sneak previews. But actually, for me, it's just that access to really interesting, smart people. Yeah. And the way it really pays off for me is less when there's one person talking, but more when there's 2, 3, 4, 5 of them bouncing ideas off each other, and it just goes off the cuff, and something amazing happens, and you remember it for years to come.
And the big thing is, it's not access like, it's not Dan Abnett in his local GW signing some books, or local comic book shop, which people queue up because you get access to Dan Abnett. It's Dan sat at a table which you're sat at, and you literally being able to look him in the eye, ask him a question, and hear his full response without feeling like you've got to move on quickly so the next person can get in. Yeah. Or it's Dan Abnett answering a question you've asked someone else.
Yeah,
which you don't get that anywhere else. So that is definitely an aspect that makes it worth the money if you're into that kind of thing.
And as you say, sitting around a table. So this doesn't always happen. It did happen last year, I think. They did a sort of cafe clutch, like a meet and greet on the Sunday morning, where I got in there quite early, and it was a bunch of us fans sat at one end of the room and all the authors congregating at the other end of the room, looking awkward. But once they got sort of corralled out and started sitting down at the tables and just joining in with conversations, I love that sort of thing, because you get exactly as you said. So Dan gets mobbed a little bit, but there are loads of people just listening to him talk, asking questions, and it gives you the opportunity to get some cheeky books signed, go and have a bit of a natter, but just talk to people and hear from people in even more informal settings than sat in a row of seats listening to them or queuing up for a signing.
What was really interesting was listening to that Remembrancers retreat. Dave, the gentleman, I actually spoke to him briefly at the weekend without realising who he was, which is a bit of a shame. But he was saying, Dan told us, he was telling some stuff, and I won't repeat it because I kind of got the feeling that we shouldn't be repeating it. And I'm like, well, if Dan's told you in the open, then, tough. That's Dan's fault if he shouldn't have told you, because that's public domain now. But just to be felt to be included, I was like, wow, that's a guy who hasn't been to the weekend. I may have been to one before, a long time ago. But it shows you what that felt like for being on that.
And I think it's a little bit of an introvert's nightmare, really, isn't it? And I think if they'd had it at the first ever Weekender, I would just have sat in a corner quietly and not spoken to anyone. But now I know, like yourself, I know so many people there, whether it's authors and editors that I've just sort of become friends with, people that I've met at every Weekender and keep in touch with. So I now feel confident enough to go around and just say hi, or bring someone else who sat on the fringes into the conversation. And I think as long as you have a mixture of people, then it works really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we talk about some of the some of your highlights from the other seminars?
I'm just reminding myself of what I went to. So I went to a couple of the horror seminars. So while I'll be the first to put my hands up to say I'm a bit of a chicken and I don't really watch horror films, and I haven't historically thought I read much horror, I've actually been reading all of the Warhammer horror stuff and really enjoying it, and slowly come to the conclusion that if you read Warhammer, you read horror anyway.
Yeah.
Just to a greater or lesser degree. Anyway, there was a great seminar with David and Clint talking about their 2 new Warhammer horror novels, and they were so endearing as we were waiting for it to kick off. Again, Q was running late, so the whole thing ran a little bit late. They were just sat at the front admiring the beautiful covers of each other's new novels, because Rachel, who's designing the Warhammer horror covers, is nailing it. Yeah. That was really endearing. But those 2 are so into the horror, they're so knowledgeable that hearing them bounce references and opinions around the genre, that was super interesting. And I almost wanted to just go up to them afterwards and say, here's a pen and paper, write down some books I should read.
Yeah.
Because it's so interesting. And then I also went to one about Invocations, which is a soon-to-be released horror short story anthology, and that had, I'm just looking at it here, that had 6 people who have written for that anthology. So David again, but Nick Kime, Justin Hill, Ray Cluley, Richard Strachan, and Jake Osger. And I had met 3 of them before, but Ray, Richard, and Jake were pretty new to me, so I got a really nice balance of people I'm quite familiar with, newer authors, just throwing around ideas, talking about their own stories, talking around what inspired them, where the line is with horror, what makes a good horror story. And again, just bouncing things. One person would say something, the other one would chip in with a sort of analogous comment or a comment on top of it. And I absolutely loved that. And it really left me fired up to go away and read that anthology. And, that's the point, isn't it? That's why a company puts something on.
Oh, yeah.
So that you want to go and buy something.
Absolutely.
If I hadn't already had it, I would have gone immediately after that seminar and bought the copy of that book because I was fired up for it. And that's kind of the point.
That is absolutely the point. I'm looking forward to see. I know Justin's quite excited about his delve into horror.
And Justin talked about how he doesn't read horror, but he's really enjoying writing it, which I find fascinating. But apparently his editor read his new Necromunda novel, Terminal Overkill, which came out a while ago, and then immediately just said, Justin, I think if you considered writing horror. So I'm quite looking forward to reading that one, because it sounds quite dark.
Good times.
What about you? What were your highlights?
So I didn't actually do a huge amount of the seminars. I had some time off. Chilled.
We'll come back to that because I think that's important.
Yeah,
we'll come back to it afterwards.
I'm trying to remember what I jumped into. Siege of Terror: The Beginning of the End was.
Okay. I didn't go to that one.
It was very much what you expect from a Siege of Terror kind of thing. In that we've had these before with Heresy and with not End Times, the Time of Legends, and all. It's the 3. It was 3 authors. Who did we have? Guy, Gav, and John.
So the guys who have written Siege
the first
stories
3 books, and Neil was there as well. And as usual, Neil gets 1 or 2 questions that he can answer. But it was the usual kind of, how do you deal with the factor in the siege now, that kind of aspect and the challenges it brings, and how do you feel with it all ending. But it was just nice to be in that kind of, so it wasn't a stunning, full of brand new information kind of thing, but it was that familiar guys who know what they're doing, who've been in this for a long time, and they were genuinely there was a couple of moments where it was one of them would be talking about how difficult their book was, and they all just gave a knowing look to each other.
I bet.
I sat with Chris Wright on the Friday night actually, and he's was talking about his book, and he didn't give any details or anything like that, but he just turned around and he said, the pressure on this book is immense, and And I've talked to the guys, and they all said it was the hardest book they've had to do. And he had talked to Dan as well. I still found out on the Friday that Dan was doing the fourth book, and he said, yeah, even Dan kind of thing is like, this is the hardest book I had to write. And he wrote No Fear and whatever else for whatever companies and all that. But the amount of kind of what they have to do with all the information to make sure it all works and everything else, on top of the fact that this is the Siege of Terror, means there is that pressure. So you had all that kind of thing built into that as well, which was, it was good. It was really good.
Well, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? How you can pick and choose what you want from the Weekender. So there's a whole strand, as we've talked about, of the writing stuff, the behind the scenes. There's quite a lot of seminars about the big things. So there was that one, people talking about, Rachel talking about her recent, her new Sisters of Battle stuff, Chris talking about Valdor, Guy and Darius talking about their new Blood Angel books, Dan and Rachel Harrison talking about the new Sabbath Crusade background book. So you can go to those things if you want to know about the big releases and the cool, huge series. You can go to the writing stuff. You can go to the slightly lower key things like the horror ones I went to, or I went to a really good one that was about the 40k novellas in the new novella series.
Yeah.
And that had 5 folks. So Danny Ware, Steve Lyons, Eduardo Albert, Denny Flowers, and Nate Crowley, all talking about theirs. Steve's a bit of a veteran, but the rest are varying degrees of sort of new-ish to BL. And just hearing them, again, talk about their books, talk about what inspired them, why they went for those. It's much lower key than hearing about the Siege, but that's great because you can do whatever you want. If you want to hear Nate talking about his idea for a grot pop-up book in classic Nate Crowley fashion, which I definitely would read, cool, we can go to that. But if you want to hear Chris do a read, I think, did Chris do a reading? And maybe Rachel did a reading as well?
Yeah, so...
about their new books? Great.
So I had an editor appear at my side at one point.
So, I know where this is going.
Is your name Greg? Yeah. I've heard on the grapevine that you're currently reading Valdor here this weekend. I was like, yeah, I am. And he's like, right, Chris wants to do a reading from Valdor, but we've sold out of books. So they didn't keep one back. I was already getting my book out. He's like, is there any possibility that we could, I'll return it exactly how you had it, kind of thing. So I had to lend him my book so Chris could read out of it. And he moved my page marker and didn't. I
mean, that is.
He didn't put it back.
Shocking. Greg.
It is disgraceful. But yeah,
very
it was quite funny.
You,
oh yeah, you're going to do it. And I trust Chris. I trust those guys. But yeah, no, it was quite funny. But yeah, you get those. And I wanted to avoid Valdor because I was only a third of the way through it at the time.
Yeah, sensible.
So yeah. And I did the same with the first wall as well. And it actually meant I probably had more sessions where I wasn't fully in a seminar than I was. And that's a first for me. And there was more than one time that I was thinking, okay, so is the Black Library Weekender worth it for me? I've done a lot of these now. Some of the questions are the same questions you've heard asked from the first day, and that's understandable. People are new to these things; they want to ask their question. I haven't got a problem with that at all. But I have to then break down the cost, the time, and decide, do I want to come again next year? Now, I was thinking I wouldn't. And then we had our little chat with the guy who works for Games Workshop, and I was like, actually, that sounds like it's really good. And then I started to think, and I'm hanging out with all my mates, like, is it worth it just for that? Maybe. And then with the announcement that there's no Heresy Weekender, I was like, pretty much, yeah, I'm going.
Yeah, you do get a lot. One gets a lot out of these things. It's not just the seminars.
Big time.
But you're right. It's an expensive weekend, because even if you don't stay at the Belfry, even if you stay elsewhere, even if you stay with friends, in which case, if you're not in the Belfry, you do lose a little bit of it.
Yeah.
But even if you don't do that, unless you live in Nottingham, then you've got travel costs. Most people will have accommodation costs. You've got your food and all that sort of thing, and you've got your ticket, and you've got what you buy. Now, this year, for financial reasons, I couldn't buy as much as I usually do and I was quite pleased because it's an expensive weekend.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. Even if you go on a budget, even if you didn't buy any of the new things, which would be really difficult to do because it's so tempting, it's an expensive weekend. So you do have to evaluate it. For me, I agree. And I was thinking the same thing about the Heresy weekend before I knew it wasn't going to happen. I probably wouldn't have gone in February next year if there was one. Because for me, I enjoy the hobby side of things, but it's the books I'm really interested in. Yeah. And Heresy's coming to a close, blah, 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 blah. For you, at the Black Library events, there's a decreasing amount that they can legitimately talk about in terms of the Heresy.
Yeah, that's a big factor.
Big focus for you. But for me, what I found really interesting with this one is when I first went to the Weekenders, I would religiously go to a seminar every session to make sure I was making the most out of it. I don't really do signings, so I've never bothered with those. But I'd always go to a seminar. And now I pull back a little bit. But what I did this year was really step away from the big ones. Like you say, I didn't go to the First Wall. I'd read Valdor, but I didn't go to that. And not because I didn't want to listen to Chris and Gav talk, but because you do get the same sort of questions. And now I've been to a lot of them. I wonder how much I value hearing an author talking about a book which I've not yet read, or even have just read, over in detail, over hearing a bunch of authors bouncing off each other and getting inspired and saying silly things. So I started going to the behind the scenes ones or just the lower key seminars to hear different voices. Right? I had not heard Denny Flowers talk before. I'd not heard Eduardo Albert talk. I'd never got to a seminar with Clint Werner before. So I was sort of making a point of going out of my way and just thinking, if I go to the same things I've been to in previous years, it'll feel like I'm doing the same thing. It won't feel that much different to last year. So I deliberately tried to do something a bit different. So, but I think us and everyone else who's on podcasts and blogs and this sort of thing talking about this is really valuable because I think you do have to think carefully about what you want to get out of a weekender, and deliberately not going to a seminar is actually something that I gradually came to understand is a really good idea, because they're knackering. All you're doing is sitting down on your backside for an hour at a time, and then you get up and go to the loo, buy some food or drink or whatever, and then go to another one. But it is actually quite hard work. It's a tiring weekend, even though we're not on and we're not speaking. So giving yourself a bit of break, some time to look after yourself and just chill out, go and sit in the reading room, go and talk to Neil or some of the art folks over there, buy your books when there's not a big queue, just go and sit having a natter with some mates.
Yeah, especially
if quite valuable.
If you're going to stay up late on the Friday and the Saturday, the ability to have an hour of chilling out, even if you go back to your room.
Go and have a nap.
Yeah, all those kind of things can be really good. And you talked about Valdor there, and the Siege of Terror, the First Wall. Talking about two seminars designed to sell books. That's exactly what they are, and that's fine. I haven't got a problem with that at all. What would be really interesting next year is if Chris Raitt did a seminar by himself where he talked about his books in the Heresy. That would be something where I'd be like, no, I'm definitely there for that. Like ones where he could spoil stuff, and talk in depth would be a real different feel. But, they do it to a point, but they tend to be more of a group thing.
I agree. I think the one thing that I'd like to see more of in the Black Library events is the sort of thing you get at other book events. So what you often have is the compare is another author or an editor, like the BL guys, or an agent or something like that. And it'll be an in conversation.
Sure.
So the compares at these events are great. The Black Library editors do a really good job, and they come with pre-prepared questions. But I'd like to see it turn more into a conversation and be pitched like that. And so I think a combination of those sort of deliberate in conversations alongside just an expansion of what they're doing at the moment. So, for example, I'm just looking through the list of things here. There was a seminar about navigating the Dark Millennium, which was John French, Mike Brooks, and Guy Haley. Now, I wasn't in it, so I don't know if maybe they did this. But what I'd quite like is to sort of flip that a bit and say, well, we're going to talk about space travel in 40K. So pull it back a little bit from that specific book that they're sort of there to talk about. Mike's Rites of Passage, for example, and have deliberate questions which will lead into tangents and those sort of things. To say, okay, so how do you write the warp? Or what's fun? What are the challenges? Those sort of things, and just shake them up a little bit. Have a little bit of variety that goes beyond. You've got a new book out. We'll start the seminar with, so can you tell us a little bit about your new book? Some of those, great, yeah, but others of them have a more of an in-conversation which is about their career. Like you say, wouldn't it be great if it was Dan or Graham or Guy interviewing Chris about his work and talking about the things that they've taken from it, or maybe stuff they've stolen, or that they've been like, I wish I'd written that, and be able to have that sort of dialogue. Just a mixture. Now, this is hard to prepare, especially if you're going to ask another author to be involved in it, but I think they would add additional value.
I think so. I really love that idea, actually, and I listen to some podcasts that do this haphazardly. One of them is the Adam Buxton podcast, and he does this occasionally at festivals and things.
Okay.
And I wonder if you need a different type of person to do it. Having an author do it would be great if they could do that style of chat. Yeah. And weirdly, I think it's something that a podcaster or someone of a certain podcast ilk would be very good at. So
I agree.
I think it's a slightly different skill. I'm not saying they couldn't do it, but it would take as you say, it would take a different approach, and it wouldn't work without a different approach.
Dan Abnett, for example, is so erudite and he's so calm. Yeah. He's so used to it. He would be great as an interviewer. I think you're right. Podcasters. Wade from Warhammer TV.
It was an option. You've also got to be hear so many interviewers spend too much time talking, and I do wonder if you have some of the authors, bless them, that it would be more of a 50-50 thing, which might not be a bad thing. But I suppose essentially what I'm saying is I'm up for the job.
I was just going to say, Greg, you're putting yourself forward for this.
I will do it. I'll happily do it. In fact,
but you know what?
I'll give them a link to some of my episodes, and we can go from there.
I'm sure a fair few of them already listen. What I thought was really interesting, so this is going off tangent, I'll come back. You'll see why.
Fine.
So one of the things which I sort of wryly enjoyed and find amusing was that a few of the lads who go to all these events did a vote, a poll, sort of set of awards, which I thought were great fun, and it was silly things. Who gave the longest answer, who tugged the heartstrings, so the most. Although there was full on spoilers in that list of
disgraceful
choices. Really,
which death was the most emotional, basically.
Yeah, but I really like that, and I like the fact that BL ran with it, and then in Neil's closing address, he announced the winners.
Yeah.
And I think with things like that, we're maybe talking a bit, I don't know if we'll get to it, around they sort of a slightly half-hearted attempt to have games and those sort of things available. As audience participation in the audio drama of the evening, which I think was probably the best of the three so far this year.
Probably.
I guess what I'm getting at is that if you are enthusiastic and good and personable, and few people there might know you especially, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that they would actually be up for doing something, not in everything, but something of an evening, or the last seminar on the Saturday. I think it could be really good fun if you specifically went out of your way to say that this seminar is engaging with the community in a slightly different way. I'd love to see that, or do it at BL Live, something like that. Give it a test. So if
there's definitely room there for something slightly different, which
I think so.
Black Library wouldn't think about because of the nature of the way they have to think about their event. When you're outside of that, you can come at it from a different angle, which is fine. That's the way it is. But there's definitely room, and they've even as you say, those guys didn't have any authority to do anything.
Nope.
They just went off their own back, ruined everyone's weekend by telling them great spoilers for books. but that had a little bit of fun while they did it. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, it was really cool.
It was. I think the general impression I'm getting from the two of us bouncing ideas and thoughts about the weekend, there was definitely, as there will always be, some things which provide room for improvement, but a positive experience all around. Now, we both got interviewed for Warhammer TV, although I haven't yet seen
it hasn't come out
the
yet.
footage. So maybe they looked at my ugly face and went, "Oh, we can't run that," or maybe we just did such a bad job.
I think
Can't
Howard
we
did a
that.
very good job, though. Howard put us all to shame.
But I would expect nothing less. He listens to the show, so he will love us saying this. But he did. I expected he would do a good job. He did do a very good one. But they hopefully they will come out at some point. Those little snippets. That was asking us what we enjoyed, and we all seem, obviously you're going to be positive because you want to be enthusiastic. But I think it's nice. It's a fun event, and yes, it's not going to be for everyone. And yes, each year there's going to be more of something you like or less of something you like, whatever it might be. If you strip away the cost and how knackering it is, and the fact that this year I got plumbing ill afterwards, I definitely got con crud from someone. Although maybe I was already getting ill, and so I gave other people it. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I look forward to the weekend so much and for so long, and it's so much fun. If you can get there, if you don't live in the UK, it's even more expensive and a pain in the bum. And hopefully, Games Workshop will do more Black Library related events elsewhere in future. But at the moment, this one is in the UK. If you can get there, if you can afford it, if you can have the time, there really is nothing else like it. And as a fan, even if you are only a Heresy fan or only an Age of Sigmar fan, it would be worth it, because once or twice in the past, there's been times where you've had to recognise they just aren't able to talk about something.
Yeah.
Just come at the wrong time. The End Times seminar, famously for me, was a total waste of time. They just should have not done it.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't possibly say anything. Anyway, but if you love the books and you want to talk to other people about them and meet friends,
Yeah.
there's nothing like it.
No.
And for all the things that I would have liked to have seen done a little bit better, I had such a good time.
If you just want information, then don't come.
No.
I think. I just think you'll be let down. Especially now with the coming soon seminars. With the Warhammer community, we talked about it earlier. With their post, everything from the coming soon seminar is up there within a few minutes. That
seminar was scheduled I've got the schedule here in front of me. It was due to finish at 3:45. 15 minutes later, the community post was up with it doesn't cover the little bits of info you get in the Q&A, but all of the new books they announced, every one of them was in that community article. So you're right. There's no value in coming purely for information. But I think there are a lot of people who read Black Library books for information about their favourite factions.
Yeah,
that's not who this is for.
No, you're setting yourself up for failure for that. The first weekender, maybe, there was loads of information, but I think they've learned about how to balance that out. But yeah, and we've got some cool stuff coming as well. And these little things like, you will find out little bits of information, and they will generally make their way online to the usual spots. If you're into books, you will know where to go to find these things. As I say, talking to Chris, I talk to Chris every weekender that he's there and every open day, and we don't chat a lot outside of that, but we might tweet each other, might comment on tweets or what have you. But just be able to sit down and chat to him on the Friday, and at that point he kind of said, "Oh yeah, Dan's doing this and this and this," and it was like, "All right, cool." Dan's doing that. Oh, hopefully they'll be announcing that on Sunday, kind of thing. But it was that little bit of joy. You can get information there, but I mean, I got it 2 days early, and literally it was like, Mike, he's doing 2. Maybe he's doing 2. Who knows? Assuming everything, but even just sitting down and chatting. Now, I did have a small moment of when Graham was there. God, however many years ago it was, and this American couple were there, and every time I seemed to sit down to talk to Graham, this Magnus, flipping cat. Every time I seem to talk to Graham one-on-one, bless them, this American couple wanted to talk to Graham, and I was like, crack on. And within 5 minutes of sitting down talking to Chris, an American couple had come along and were like, hi. And I was like, they're from California. That's even further away than last time. But we got to have a little chat over time and whatever. But it's good. It's great to see, those guys come all the way from California, and the girlfriend had only just got into Black Library books like a year or so before, I think. And
cool.
and it was one of Chris's books. I think it was Battle for the Fang that got her into them. So that's fantastic. It was quite cool to see that, actually. It was quite funny because that gentleman, bless him, on the Sunday morning, he turned around to me and he said, "So what are you? What part of this? What are you to do with this organisation?" I was like, "Nothing, mate. I come to them. That's literally all it is. What you're seeing is someone who comes to these events and engages and reaches out. And I'm not, although I'm an introvert generally, I can be bold enough to stand up there and put my voice out. So that helps unashamedly. But he mistook me for staff.
Oh, that's fun.
But what's quite funny is I was texting my missus at one point on the Saturday night, and I just literally wrote, "Michael's king of this place." It's like, every now and then an author will come up and talk to me, but it was like another author's going up to talk to Michael, and another author's going up to talk to Michael, and that's by virtue of the hard work you put in and the quality of what you do as well. But also appearing at these events, you haven't done anything. You haven't done anything magical for that to happen.
Not at all.
You engage and you talk and you respond in an intelligent manner.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah, but obviously you do. Otherwise, people wouldn't come and talk to you, would they? And but that just shows you that if you go to these events and you're a bit like, oh, tell me what you're working on, and again, all you're after is like that little secret, then you won't get that kind of interaction back. No. But if you just talk to people and ask questions and are interested and whatever, and but it was great to see John and to talk to him about stuff that wasn't books and everything else. It's you don't get these opportunities a huge amount. And I live in the UK. Like, people tell me, it's easy for you. You're in the UK, and it's like, well, it's not. I see John French like 2-3 times a year maximum, and and 2 of those times will be if he happens to be walking through Bugman's while I'm in there.
Yeah.
You're
right, though. You have to be prepared to sort of put yourself out there. And I'm much the same, not an extrovert in any stretch of the imagination, but through practice and just familiarity and just plucking up the courage, you build relationships. And I've met, I know loads of the authors now, and loads of people that I've seen at these events every year.
Yeah.
And I love it. It brings me out of my shell in a way that nothing else I do, nothing else in the year does.
Sure.
My friends wind me up telling me I'm working the room and all this stuff, which is fun. But it is great. And you're right. The chance to just sit and have a natter, that's the best part of it. I wrote my roundup of it, and I included loads of stuff around little extra bits and pieces that were in the Coming Soon seminar. But all the little bits, just the fun chats I had with people, with authors and actors round and about, I don't go in because it's not that sort of information. It's not information, is it? It's just these are nice people, and I'm not going to say I'm good friends with them, but I've built a relationship with a lot of these people out of just mutual interest, and like you say, just having a chat and being interested and asking questions. And I think that's all it is. And if you don't write a blog, it doesn't matter.
No. Absolutely.
Kate and a couple of others always say, it's so much fun meeting you and blah, and they say my mate's names at the same breath as mine, because to them, these guys coming to all the events I do, they see us all the same. We're all enthusiastic fans, and if you go to a bunch of these and are nice and are positive and don't act like a dick, you're gonna be able to have those nice conversations.
And what's so I'm terrible with names, and I don't always ask for names either, which is one of my biggest things I need to work on. But the amount of times I'm like, what was that guy's name again? Because I've met X person
Yeah.
6 or 7 times, but their name doesn't stick because you meet 40 new people that year.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lady, and I cannot remember the name. She's American, but she lives in England. She lives in Nottingham, and
All right.
she came up to me at some point and said, "Are you still looking for a second ticket for the first wall?" Because she knew I was giving one away for the charity raffle, and I was like, "Yeah, I am." And she's like, "Yeah, I have mine. I'm not going to buy it, but I remember you saying so." And I like, fantastic. Thank you very much. That's really kind of you. You know, she could have given that on, bought it for a friend, bought one to sell, whatever, and she's chosen to give it away like that. You know, and I saw her around about every time we stopped and chatted and all that. But it's those are the things where next year, if we're there again, maybe I'll remember her name. But but we'll chat. That's the way. That's what's great about it. So
and I think every time that you go to an event like this, you think, oh, is it quite right? Because it's so much money and blah blah blah, all the stuff we've talked about. It's always that social aspect of it that I come back to and think, it's worth it. Even the Heresy Weekender, if it had been happening, and I would pretty much come to the conclusion that I couldn't justify it. I would, if I wasn't there, I'd be feeling such FOMO, and so probably when the tickets went on sale, I'd be saying to my mates in the week running up, going, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm not going." And the minute they went on sale, I'd have probably caved.
I think even my missus coming to the Heresy Weekender understood why I came.
Oh yeah.
And so if you can be at an event and have an appreciation without actually going into any part of that event, that explains a lot. I do want to put a shout out for the editing team, the editors, particularly.
Always.
Yeah, particularly Richard, Kate, and Hannah. And I'm sure the others did a great job as well, but I didn't see them as much and I don't know them as well. But, I actually got hold of one of the Warhammer TV guys and was like, you need to get these guys on the podcast because they're, although they're not in their natural habitat, Hannah particularly was like a little bit like, oh, podcast, oh, like they're brilliant at getting getting across kind of what's required and doing it in an informative but fun way, and there is information there that is useful for readers as well.
Yeah.
I think getting them onto Voxcast or the other one, the Stormcast, would be pretty cool.
I agree. I had a quick chat with a couple of them about that as well, and I think Nick would like it. Nick's been on loads on that and on Warhammer TV and that sort of thing. Nick Kime, Kate and Hannah in particular, maybe are happy to be behind the scenes, but I agree. There's a lot of value that they could add, and so many people would find it interesting because they're very different to the sort of personalities you get on Voxcast and Stormcast generally. They come at their work from a different angle. I think that would be fascinating. And just a broad, because it's not an author talking about their work. It's the editors talking about the work of Black Library.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I love that. If they'd get on community podcasts, come and write interviews with me. I've asked in the past to get comments, and it's always, understandably, I'm not going to push it because I get it, but it's, to me, from a Black Library perspective, it's the next step. The authors, who are all freelance, or most of them, are brilliant at engaging with the community. The editors, understandably a little reticent, but I think it would push things forward a little bit, give people a perspective they don't get. And I don't think the editorial team get enough recognition when you consider that pretty much every week there's at least one new novel or audio drama.
Yeah.
Even the reprints need editorial work. Multiple weeks there's 2, 3, 4, 5 new things. That's hundreds of products a year, plus a new short story pretty much every week, plus all the advent, and oh my goodness, so much work goes into this.
So not to mention that most people don't understand what an editor does anyway.
Absolutely.
And we're also talking about people here who are integral in the pushing of Games Workshop's lore. So even just from a pure kind of, even if you're a gamer, like these people have an effect on, they're deeply entrenched in what needs to happen or can't happen or what have
Absolutely.
you. So there's a lot of value in that as well. Yeah. It would be really good to get them on something. And you're right. I think there are elements of Games Workshop where now they probably should be loosening up a little bit of that allowance, of allowing people to appear other places. It'll be interesting to see if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all going in the right direction. Hopefully, it continues to do that, and the last few areas of resistance are broken down. A few barriers are broken down. Well, we can't really complain.
No.
If you do get to go to one of these events, you'll see how much work the editors put in to the events, to their day jobs. And if you have gone to these events and you haven't made a point of going and talking to them, there are always the folks who are comparing, who are sitting in the front being the MC. They're often quite busy, as you'd imagine, but find the time. Several of them always hang around on the Saturday night.
Yeah.
Find the time to go talk to them. Go talk to Matt, the audio producer, who's incredibly hardworking. Kate and Hannah. Go talk to Rachel Harrison about her sort of day job as the senior art commissioner. I can never remember her exact job title. She commissions the cool artwork. She worked closely with Dan on the new Sabbath Crusades book. I mean, that work is amazing. Just thinking about the quality of 99% of the new books and audios, phenomenal. It's great to hear from them, but I think it's nice when we can recognise what they do as well.
Definitely. Anything else before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think it was a great success.
Yeah.
We've talked about things nice to see next time. I don't think there's much really. Go and have a look on Track of Words. There's loads of information on there, but to be fair, we've probably covered most of it. Go and buy the new books. And I know we don't work for Black Library, but the new Sisters of Battle book, which was available there, is available everywhere. Is amazing.
That's Rachel, is it?
Rachel's.
Yeah, I need to read more Rachel.
Oh, she is. I think for me, she's gone beyond one to watch. She's now instant buy.
And that's kind of what I keep hearing. So yeah. Must get on.
So she's written an Imperial Guard novel, a Blood Angels novella, the Sisters of Battle novel, an audio, and a bunch of short stories.
Yeah.
And they've just been another level. It's that Sisters book I read in a day. Was broken by the end of it. It's emotional in a way that Warhammer stories aren't often emotional.
Cool.
I absolutely loved it. But all the novellas, like, there's so much good stuff coming out. I think it reminded me. I mean, I'm embedded in this. I talk about it all the time. I'm writing about it all the time. But sometimes, even then, seeing it all in one place and seeing all those incredibly talented people in one place, it's a really powerful way of reminding myself not to take this for granted. That Warhammer stuff, tie-in fiction, it gets a bad rep still from a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean,
nonsense. It's amazing.
You only have to look at other big IPs to see how, like, take Dragonlance, for instance, one part of D&D, and there's some really good, fun stuff, and there is some absolute dross. And there are some hits or misses with Black Library, and a lot of that would depend on what style of books you like, but actually the quality, and we talked about this on before on the main show. These guys get acknowledgement for what they're writing for Black Library, so it can't be terrible.
No.
So
Rachel won. John won an award last year. Rachel won one this year for the Scribe Awards, which is sort of for tie-in fiction. But if you consider that Warhammer is getting recognised within the field of tie-in fiction, when you consider that the Heresy books, until we went to hardback, were consistently NYT bestsellers.
Yeah.
If decisions were different, if the publishing framework and ecosystem were a bit different, things would look different. When you look at Warhammer Horror, Warhammer Crime, which is coming. If you go into, I can't speak outside London, if you go into a lot of the Waterstones, you'll see on the horror tables where they've got piles of books out, bunch of the Kim Newman stuff, some of the anthologies, in a way that you almost never see a Horus Heresy book or a Gaunt's Ghost book or whatever front out, because it's still bookshops treat it a little bit sniffily, like it's tagged on at the end, tie and stuff, gaming fiction. The horror stuff is changing that. I think the crime will do as well. We're in there now. We liked it before it was cool.
Absolutely.
It's all good.
It's good fun. Awesome, Michael. Well, we'll have you on again soon, I'm sure.
I shall look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
All right.